Welcome to Behind the Story, episode 24, where we learn the story behind the story. I'm Naomi Craig, author of biblical fiction, Rahab's Courage.
And my name's Lisa Renee. I'm a Christian contemporary romance author of Fake Identity at Stake. So before we have Liz Tolzma on, which is an exciting and an emotional interview, which you'll be very touching interview. First of all, I just wanted to catch up with Naomi. Where are you, Naomi? It doesn't look like you're in your normal place.
So I'm meeting up with some dear friends for just a little girls retreat. So we had a couple of the girls flew in from other states, and then we just kind of drove up and met. So we're in. Yay!
I'm jealous.
So.
Well, I was going to have a writers retreat this weekend in Queensland, but there's some lockdowns happening over east, so we're doing it online. And then there was a family church camp, so I'm actually going to be going on a camp in a couple of hours.
Exciting!
But it won't be in a nice bed. It'll be on a little blow-up mattress in a tent.
Oh goodness, it's real camping, huh?
Oh man, haven't done that for a decade, so we'll see how that goes. So what have you been up to in your writing world?
I'm just really diving into trying to find research on architects and the time period of my latest book. So I checked out books at a library. I've got a stack that's probably I won't even get to, It's just really trying to get that all planned out and formatted in my brain, and then start plotting it out. So how about you? What are you up to? You've been pretty busy.
So there was a release out October the 6th, the Mosaic collection that I'm a part of. So it's called The Heart of Christmas. So we're getting our novellas out early, and it's my one is a rom-com. There's some serious stories, emotional women's fiction, and some lighthearted stories as well, with all Christmas themes. And but my one can be read all year round, but yeah, it is about a nativity play that goes wrong. So, and a bit of a romance and something to cheer people up.
It's very fun.
We had on our last show, we had a rom-com author, Sarah Mons on, and she was giving away readers a choice of her Sewing Cow series, and the winner is posted in our show notes. So if you guys want to check that out, and Sarah, it was a lot of fun. So if you haven't seen the episode, look. Also, I wanted to mention that Naomi and I have our own YouTube channels, and we've been posting our episodes there, but we've started up a Behind the Story YouTube channel. And so if you guys who are subscribed to Naomi and my YouTube, can you go and subscribe to the new one? We'll have the link there. And so that's where you'll hear it first. We're also on podcast, and we have the links if you prefer to listen instead.
Yeah, and I just found out recently, because I'm really with it, that on the podcast, if you go to it's the Behind the Story with Naomi and Lisa. What is the actual website, Lisa?
Well, it's WordPress.com. I don't know if it comes, that part's last or beginning, but Behind the Story, Naomi and Lisa.
And so you can subscribe and then get notified, whatever it is. We'll link it, but you can get notified right away of the latest episodes. So you get to hear
a really
lots
cool
of
feature.
fun.
So if we'll have that link in as well, you can subscribe to the blog, and you'll get a little email notification, a little summary of what the episode is about. So keep up to date, and you'll have the links to the giveaways. We always have a giveaway every time.
Like Lisa said, we had a fantastic interview with Liz Tolzma lined up. We're so excited to share this with you. Liz Tolzma has authored several World War II novels, romantic suspense novels, prairie romance, and even an Amish romance. She's a popular speaker and an editor, and resides next to a Wisconsin farm field with her husband and their youngest daughter. Her son is a U.S. Marine, and her oldest daughter is a college student. Liz enjoys reading and walking, working in her large perennial garden, kayaking and camping, and she's also the host of Christian Historical Fiction Talk podcast. Liz, thank you so much for joining us on Behind the Story.
Thank you so much for having me on the show. I'm really glad to be here today.
Awesome. So for those who don't know you, can you tell us a little bit about you and your writing?
Sure. I have been writing seriously since about 2001, and I had my first book published in 2011, and I've been writing steadily since then. I'm now over 20 published books. I've actually lost count, which is kind of cool to say that I have so many. I've lost count. And I just love writing. I love creating. I have, ever since I was a little girl, loved making up stories. My parents would call me Sarah Bernhardt. I guess she was this really over the top, dramatic, silent screen star. And they called me that just because I always had this flair for the dramatic and was always making up stories and everything like that. So I guess it's always been inside of me, but it took me a while to find that that was my true career path in life. And I live in Wisconsin with my husband and our daughter who has special needs. So we call her our lifer. She'll be with us as long as we're able to take care of her. But she's a great joy and we love her to little bits and pieces. And I'm sure I'll talk more about her because she has a lot to do with the book that was just released. And then I have a grown son who is a Marine recruiter in Austin, Texas, and a daughter who's a college senior. And she's been all over the place. She's an international studies major. So she worked for a mission in Greece over the summer, and she's currently in Jordan doing her semester abroad. So it's a busy household and keeps me on my toes. And in addition to the writing, I also edit both for private clients and I do some freelance editing for a publisher. And then I also speak. So I have podcasts. So if I can do it, I do it.
Yeah, I love hearing all about what's going on in your life. That's exciting. So your latest release, A Picture of Hope, is book 2 in The Heroines of World War II and released October 1st. So tell us about the story and what sparked the series, and you're part of a conglomeration on that, right?
Right. So The Heroines of World War II is a series of books. There will be 12 altogether by Barber Publishing. And they did this with the True Colors Crimes series, where it's standalone books by different authors, but they're all tied together by a theme. So they had the True Colors Crimes, which are based on true crimes. They have another one that's going on right now that's Doors to the Past. So it is dual time and deals with famous landmarks. And they've just now started this Heroines of World War II series. So the first book came out in August, and mine just released in October, and there's going to be one every other month for 2 years. And that was the brainchild of Becky Germany, who's the acquisitions editor at Barber Publishing. She comes up with all these great ideas, and she just thought it would be great to do a World War II series. And of course, I heartily agreed with that. And this is a story that had been sitting in my computer for a while. I didn't write anything of it, but I had a little sketch of what I wanted to write about this book. So when I got an email from my agent saying that Becky wanted to do this series and did I want to submit anything to it, I knew right away that I was going to pull this story out, which I did, and I submitted it. And I was so thrilled that they went ahead and decided to use this one because, as I said before, it's a story that's been very close to my heart. It was a very personal one to write. It's the story of an American photojournalist who has been spending most of the war in England, just taking pictures of mothers standing in milk lines, sort of boring, routine stuff, not too much interesting going on after the Battle of London is finished. And she is yearning for some excitement in her life and a bit of adventure. And she happens on a hospital ship that's crossing the channel from Southampton over to Normandy. And this is based on a real story. A real American reporter, Martha Gellhorn, actually did this, slipped onto the hospital ship and got across to France that way. And so I stole that from Martha Gellhorn, and it was a good way to get her into France. When she gets to France, she finds herself behind enemy lines and needs the help of a French maquisard, a resistance fighter. And they stumble on this horrific tragedy that has happened. I don't want to spoil it, but that's all I'll say. And one of the survivors of this is a little girl with Down syndrome. And of course, the Nazis had a whole list of people that they wanted to eliminate. We think of the Jews, but it was really far more than the Jews. It was the Jews. It was the Slovaks, so Polish people, Slovakian people, that race of people they wanted to eliminate as well. The Gypsies, Jehovah's Witnesses, and people with any kind of intellectual or physical disability. Anybody who wasn't perfect, they wanted to eliminate. So obviously a child with Down syndrome would be at very great risk of coming to great harm at the hand of the Nazis. So they race across France, trying to stay one step ahead of the Nazis to get Claire, this little girl, and some others that they meet up with across the French border and into Switzerland. So that's pretty much the story. But it was really personal to me because my daughter has an intellectual disability, to write a story about children with intellectual disabilities, and to think that if she had been born in another time, in another place, my daughter would have been a target for the Nazis. And that made it very, very personal for me.
Wow, that's amazing. Like, you know, being able to put your personal story and, you know, emotion into that would just bring so much tension and reality to it. So awesome. So this the way you're describing it, I mean, it sounds quite suspenseful. I can imagine it having a bit of suspense in it. So is it different to the suspense that you've previously written in the crime series?
Well, it's different in that it's not a crime necessarily, although obviously what the Nazis were doing was criminal. But yes, there is a level of suspense in all of my World War II books. In most of my books, you're going to find some suspense. I just naturally tend to write that way, I guess. From the very first book that I published, there was some suspense in it. So it was a natural fit. I'd written the World War II first. I have 6 other World War II books out, and then I wrote the 4 romantic suspenses. But it was a pretty natural jump for me to be able to write that because I was used to writing suspensefully. There's differences between them, and I needed to learn how to really write romantic suspense and combine those 2 elements. But it wasn't too hard to make the jump, and obviously not too difficult to make the jump backwards. So there are a lot of parallels in the way I write in both genres.
So when you were doing the True Colors, were you handed a crime that just hadn't been solved, or did you have any input on what that was going to be, or did they tell you, or did you come up with them? Or
again, Becky Germany from Barber Publishing came up with the idea for this, and she, for the first, I believe it was the first 6 books, she had a list of crimes that she had researched and wanted to see done. So I picked 2 of them that sounded interesting to me that I thought I'd like to write about, and I submitted those to her. She bought both of them, and I wrote them, and then she put out a call that they needed more authors for this series. And so then the crimes were up to us to pick out. So then I did have to go and do some research on some true American crimes, which wasn't as easy as it sounded. You had to not only find a crime, but find one that you could write a whole novel about. And that wasn't too gruesome, but that would be really suspenseful. So it was hard to find something that would be just right. But I guess I hit on them because she bought both of the ones that I proposed then as well. So I ended up writing a total of 4 books in that series.
So I live in a small town in Arizona, and just recently we went to their 1910 jail, and there's a lot of interesting stories. So I know I haven't actually read the true crimes, but I kept thinking of you and all the other ladies who have written them, like they should be over here learning about all this. And
cool. I'd love that.
yeah, it's in Globe, Arizona. There's some, of course. So we went on this historical tour, and I think the gentleman, his main job was to do the paranormal tours. So he was leaning a little bit more towards the ghost stories than
they do that in jail tours. They're trying to scare you. So. I know one of the other authors in the crime series, the Purple Dress, A.D. Lawrence. Is she in your series?
Yeah.
She would do some editing for the Collaborative Press for me. She's just a fun lady. So your covers are really amazing and beautiful. Do you have much input into them?
For the ones that I write for Barbara, I've had a pretty good amount of input into them. The true crime series, they just were bang on with those. They were gorgeous from the beginning, and I really didn't have any changes to any of those. They were spectacular. And of course, they were all following a theme through the whole series. So they were all very similar in many ways. For A Picture of Hope, we really went back and forth about what kind of cover to have for that one. We played around with it quite a bit. And then they came with the cover, and I loved it. And the more I looked at it, though, the more I went, this is kind of looking familiar to me. And I went back through, and sure enough, I had just read a book by Melanie Dobson. And of course, I'm drawing a blank right now on what the title of that book was. And I'm thinking, that's why this looks so familiar. It's very similar to one of her covers. So I went back to the team and told them, and they're like, oh, you're right. We can't do that. So we went and we tweaked some things and changed some things and made it different. And they also had the Eiffel Tower in there at one point, which was really cool, but they never do go to Paris. So we had to take the Eiffel Tower out. But I think what we ended up with was really gorgeous, and I was really, really pleased with it. And I love being able to have some input and to be able to work along with them to get a cover that tells the story right in that picture on the front cover and to make it appealing. So that's how this one came about anyway.
So where do you're from Wisconsin, is that correct? Have you lived there your whole life, or?
I was born in Florida, and my dad was a pastor. So when I was 8 years old, he got a church up here in Wisconsin, and we loved it so much. He's still living here, and I call myself the good girl of the family. I have 2 sisters. They both still live in the Midwest, but they aren't here. I'm just down the road from my parents. So I say I'm the good girl because I stayed at home to take care of mom and dad. But no, my husband's from here also. And so we live just a few minutes from the town that we both grew up in, and we love it here. And I don't know what the Lord has in mind for us in coming years as our children are really around the globe right now and where we'll end up. But for right now, we love it here and are very, very happy to be living here.
Yeah, sounds beautiful. So tell us something that our listeners will be surprised to know about you.
What secret should I reveal?
The juicy ones.
First scene here.
Exclusive to Behind the Story.
Right. Okay, so I was just doing this today, so I think that's why I'm thinking about it, but I talk to myself all the time. I'm sort of weird that way. It's no matter
I hear
what
this
I'm
a lot
doing.
from writers. You're amongst friends.
You just need an expert opinion every now and then. There's no shame in that.
Well, it's even stupid little things, like just before I came on here, I looked at my kitchen and the dishes sitting in the sink, and I said out loud, it said, I guess I really should probably load the dishwasher. There's nobody here to hear me except the cat, but why I said it out loud, I don't know, but I did. So I guess that's kind of a weird little tidbit that people might not know.
Encouraging yourself. Yeah, you can do it. You can do
Motivational speaking. I believe in you. I have faith in you. So what hobbies do you have outside of reading and writing?
I love gardening. That's something that it must be genetic, because my dad was a big gardener. My grandfather was a big gardener. I have cousins who are gardeners. So that's something that we love to do. We all love perennials. So we have these huge perennial gardens, and I'm out there a lot during the summer, just working and, doing all kinds of things out there. I love doing that. Last weekend, we were kind of crazy and took a chance and went camping in northern Wisconsin in the beginning of October. I mean, there could be snow up there, but it was gorgeous. It was in the 70s. The sun was out. We had rain one night, but otherwise it was great. So I really enjoy when we get away and go camping. And I love to hike. So we did a little bit of that while we were up there as well. And so those are some of the things. And I've really gotten bitten by the travel bug in the last several years. So I love to travel as well.
Definitely. I love hiking and doing a bit of camping this weekend. I'm not sure how I'll go with that. I haven't done that for a long time. But awesome. So what inspired you to start writing in the first place? Was there a burning story that you had, or you just wanted to do writing and then you found a story to get started? How did it all begin?
Well, like I said, from a very early age, I had an active imagination and overactive imagination, my parents might say. And when I was little, they would ask me, well, what do you want to do when you grow up? And I would say that I wanted to be a writer. And people would tell me, well, you can't make any money at that. And they were absolutely right. But, and so then I said, well, I'll be a journalist, because then I can write and make money. And they said, oh, you're too shy. You can't be a journalist. So I became a teacher, which the Lord really used, because we ended up homeschooling our kids for a few years. And my minor was special education. So that's really come in handy with a daughter with special needs. But then a 9/11 happened, and I was still a relatively young woman at the time. And I had felt like a lot of young people feel invincible. Like, I was young. I had a long time left in my life to do whatever. And I realized on that day that these were just ordinary people who went to work in the morning or got on a flight and never expected it to be the last day of their lives. And I realized in that moment that I didn't want to get to the end of my life and say, I wish I would have. I wanted to get to the end of my life and say, at least I tried, because I didn't think it would go any further than that. So, of course, it was quite a surprise then when I got something published, but that was really the inspiration for me to follow my dream and stop listening to what everybody else was telling me about how I couldn't do this, and really do what I really had wanted to do all my life, which was to make stories and to create stories. So I started writing, And life got in the way, as it has the way of doing. We were homeschooling, like I said. We adopted our daughter who had special needs. So that took a lot of time and energy. And the Lord's timing is always perfect, because I'd been trying to sell books for a while and nothing was selling. It had been almost 10 years into this journey. And it was a few weeks after we sent all 3 kids off to school that I got my first contract. So I wouldn't have had time to write while I was homeschooling 3 kids and doing all that craziness. So it was perfect timing that I finally had the time to really be able to dedicate to this and make it my career. So that was 10 years ago already.
So where do all of your World War II books take place overseas in Europe? Is there like a common place for your books? Or?
I do like to set them overseas. I think that started with my first one that was based on a family story set in the Netherlands. And I loved writing about that. I thought it was different to write. At that time, not a lot of World War II authors were writing overseas stories. They were mostly writing home front stories. So I do have one novella that's home front, but everything else has been overseas. And most everything has been Europe up to this point. I do have one that was set in the Philippines. That was Remember the Lilies. And that was my son's idea, because he was always fascinated with the Marines and World War II in the Pacific Theater. So that one was for him. But I like writing about overseas theater and being in the heart of the action, I guess. I enjoy that. And I don't write about the soldiers or the fighting necessarily. I'm not into battle scenes, but I write about the ordinary people who are caught up in these extraordinary circumstances and who do extraordinary things.
Do you have American characters involved?
In Remember the Lilies, they are American characters. And in A Picture of Hope, the heroine is American. I'm trying to think. In my second one, Daisies Are Forever, there was a British character, but most of them are, I've had Dutch characters, Polish, Czechoslovakian, Hungarian, now French. And so, yeah, I like exploring other cultures and other ways of life. And I'm only a second generation American, so my culture is still, my ethnic background, my cultural background is still very strong in me. And I'm very proud of that. And I love exploring other people and other cultures. I think it's wonderful. I was just actually in Greece about a month and a half ago, researching another book, and absolutely fell in love with that. And I'm ready to set more books overseas so I can do more traveling and learn about more cultures and more ways of life.
What do you want your readers to come away after reading your book? What do you want them to say about your books?
Well, I think the greatest compliment that any reader can pay any author is, I couldn't put it down. I had to stay up till 3:00 in the morning reading it because I had to find out what was going to happen. That's always a great compliment, because that means I've created a story that has really captured their hearts and that they want to continue reading, that they like so much, they really want to continue reading it. Like I said, this one is very personal to me because it deals with children who have special needs, who have intellectual disabilities. And the Nazis were out to get rid of everybody who wasn't perfect, whose lives they deemed not worthy of being lived. And I hope that readers will come away from A Picture of Hope with a greater understanding of the preciousness of each and every single life. I think as Christians, we pay lip service to that. Sometimes we say that we're, we cherish every life. Every life is created in the image of God. And yet I know a lot of people who are maybe afraid of people who have special needs, who are afraid of my daughter and don't know what to say to her and don't know how to approach her. And I hope that they will come away after reading this book and realize that these people with disabilities are just like you and I. They want to be loved. They want people to pay attention to them. They have something worthwhile to contribute. They have something to say, and they have something to teach us. And God created them the way he did for a very special reason and for a very special purpose. And I'll try to get through the story without crying, which I'm also known to do. So there's a second deep, dark secret about me. But my husband's aunt had a form of muscular dystrophy, and she slowly deteriorated over the years until she was bedridden. She couldn't move any muscles except to blink her eyes, and she had glaucoma, so she was pretty much blind as well. Because of her condition, they couldn't do surgery on her eyes. And there were people who said that her life wasn't worth living, that they shouldn't have been taking the measures they were taking to keep her alive. And her daughter, my husband's cousin, we would visit with her, and she would say, I visited with mom before I came here, and she wanted me to let you know that she's praying for you. And I thought, she can't do anything else. She lays there in the bed. She can't see to watch TV or anything like that. She can't move herself. So many people deem her life unworthy. And yet to me and to my family, she was so very worthy because she was such a mighty prayer warrior.
Mhm.
She spent every waking hour praying because that's all that she could do. And what a worthy life that was. If only we all could spend all of our time in prayer. Not practical for most of us, but that really hit me and taught me that no matter what, no matter how limiting our disabilities are, that every life is precious and every life is worthy to be lived. And so that's really the message of the picture of hope.
And I love that about Christian fiction. We've been talking about that recently, that like people are talking about people with disabilities and people, like it's being talked about. And maybe that's not the perfect solution, but at least now we're getting an understanding and we're getting compassion for people through fiction. And I love that it's now becoming so regular to find, it's not just easy stories. There's people with real life issues and real life conditions and stuff like that now we can understand a little bit better. Hopefully we can apply that too, right?
Exactly.
So you have a lot of darkness and a lot of yucky things that you're writing about. How do you get to a place where you're being true to the story, but I mean, does it affect you? Like, are you walking around discouraged because of what you've been researching, or have you ever found that to happen? Or
It can be really hard to read and write about some of these things that actually happened. And that's the thing, it's not coming out of my imagination. A lot of what I write is historical fact, and it can be very, very disturbing and can be hard. And so sometimes I do need to just walk away from it and take a break and take a deep breath. But I think the key to it all is in the title of the book, A Picture of Hope. And I try to infuse each one of my stories with hope, that in the midst of some of the darkest times that have been in human history, that there's hope. When we trust in God and have faith in God, when we walk with him and follow him, then we have hope. Even if our circumstances in this life don't change, we have hope for the life to come.
Mhm.
So no matter how dark times get, there's always that hope in Jesus Christ, the hope that we'll have a perfect eternal home someday. And so I try to infuse that into each one of my stories. And I think that's an important lesson for people of my generation, my children's generation, my hopefully future grandchildren's generation, to know that, I'm afraid they're going to really be facing a lot of persecution like we haven't known, and that there will be very difficult times ahead for Christians. And they need to learn about this hope in the midst of darkness and trials. And so I hope that they come away from the book with some of that understanding as well.
It sounds there's so much passion in this story, so much history and depth. And for our viewers, you can check out the first chapter on Liz Tolzma's website. We'll have the links there, and you can read the first chapters of this new release. So thank you so much, Liz, for joining us today on Behind the Story.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed chatting with you both.
And remember to connect with Liz Tolzma. We've got the links down in our show notes. And she also has a Christian historical fiction podcast. So check that out, and hopefully we'll have those links as well.
And we have lots of goodies linked up in the comments. Liz is offering one US winner a paperback of A Picture of Hope. So be sure to enter in that and spread the word.
And Naomi and I have on our website, we have some freebies as well. So this one is Fake Engagement Mistake. It's a Christian rom-com, and that's connected to the other stories in the Mosaic collection, Caught in the Act and Fake Identity at Stake. And Naomi, on your website, what do you have?
I have my biblical fiction novella. It's called On Desolate Heights. It is Balaam and His Talking Donkey.
So thank you for joining us today on Behind the Story. Until next time, let us run with endurance a race set before us, looking unto Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith. God bless. So thank you again for joining us today on Behind the Story with Naomi and Lisa. Don't forget to click on the links and subscribe to our YouTube channels, and you'll keep up to date with our author interviews. Have a great week. God bless.